Why this feeling? Why this glow? Why the thrill when you say hello? It's a strange and tender magic you do, Mr. Wonderful. That's you. Why this trembling when you speak? Why this joy when you touch my cheek? I must tell you what my heart knows is true, Mr. Wonderful. That's you. And why this longing to know your charms, to spend forever here in your arms. Oh, there's much more I could say, but the words keep slipping away, and I'm left with only one point of view, Mr. Wonderful. That's you. One more thing, then I'm through, Mr. Wonderful, Mr. Wonderful, Mr.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. And thank you for joining us today as together we celebrate the life and honour the memory of Edmund Obiala, a much-loved and loving, talented, intelligent, modest, humble, gentle man. A hard-working man with a good sense of humour, a warm personality, knew what he wanted, and was proud of his Polish heritage. I'm sure that you will all wish to join me in expressing support and sympathy to Grace and all of Edmund's extended family and friends. The end of a loved one's life is one of the harsher realities that sooner or later visits us all. In some cases, we may be able to delay the inevitable for a while, but in the end, we cannot escape it. Therefore, each of us, in our own way, must face the challenge of learning to accept that which in the final analysis cannot be changed. The medieval philosopher and theologian, St. Francis of Assisi, summed up the situation rather well when he wrote, God grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. No matter how prepared we feel we may be, or how much time we have had in which to prepare ourselves, when the time comes, we begin to understand that no amount of preparation and no amount of time could really have cushioned us from the sense of loss that we experience at a time like this. Yes, we know that time heals, although sometimes that healing process can be a rather long one. But in the meantime, we can gain much comfort by holding fast to the good memories. And on reflection, there are many of them. The Consul General of the Republic of Poland in Sydney, Peter Rakowski, has prepared a magnificent greeting, and I'm going to ask him if he would be kind enough to come forward and read it in the Polish language.
Thank you. Szanowna Pani, Szanowni Państwo. I'm sorry I will be reading this in Polish, but in terms of a Polish citizen, when the head of mission prepares the letter of condolence, it's in our language. But before I start, just one comment, or maybe two comments. I'm a bit too short over here, and I didn't have a pleasure to meet Mr. Edmund Obiała, of whom I knew. And perhaps that's the thing I would wish in terms of my presence here as the Polish consul. But second thing, when I was preparing the letter, and I obviously didn't put this, I've read that we were joined in a way that now I live with my family the same voivodeship that Mr. Obiała was living, Kujawsko-Pomorskie. And I believe that every state has sometimes the two cities that are rather rivalries. In our case, it's Bydgoszcz and Toruń. I live next to Toruń. But somehow the fate of my family is also going to Bydgoszcz. My son is now graduating. Actually, today has Matura. So it's 16,000 kilometers from Poland. Now the links also of the, let's say regional motherhood or the places that we live cross. But now, if you allow me, I would read the letter of condolence in Polish. Ze smutkiem przyjąłem wiadomość o śmierci pana Edmunda Obiały, wybitnego inżyniera budownictwa, projektanta i budowniczego wielu obiektów, które na trwale weszły do krajobrazu szeregu miast na świecie. Ci, co mieli przywilej poznać pana Edmunda Obiałę, jak i ci, co dopiero mają okazję zapoznać się z jego biografią, niewątpliwie zgodzą się, że żegnamy dziś człowieka nietuzinkowego. Stadiony Sydney czy Londynu to efekt polskiej wizji i kreski, które kreślił i wykonał pan Edmund. Niemniej nie będzie nadużyciem stwierdzenie, że dla emigranta odnalezienie się w nowym miejscu, przysłowiowe stanięcie na nogi i odniesienie sukcesu są zawsze trudniejsze niż dla kogoś urodzonego w danym kraju. Jestem przekonany, że pasja w projektowaniu i tworzeniu, niewątpliwie ciężka praca i na koniec łód szczęścia doprowadziły do tego, że możemy mówić o życiu spełnionym. Myślę, że właśnie do życia pana Edmunda wyjątkowo trafnie pasuje łacińska paremia abit non obit, czyli ktoś, kto odszedł, ale nie umarł. Ktoś, po kim niezaprzeczalnie zostanie pamięć, jak i fizyczne, na dotyk dziedzictwo. Jakkolwiek Polonia australijska traci jednego ze swoich najwybitniejszych przedstawicieli, to równocześnie pozostawia on jej po sobie trwały ślad. I to na lata. W imieniu całego zespołu Konsulatu Generalnego RP w Sydney oraz własnym pragnę złożyć rodzinie i bliskim zmarłego szczere wyrazy współczucia oraz życzę sił w tym trudnym czasie. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Consul General. I wish to express my personal appreciation to Grace for meeting with me and for helping to shape this farewell to Edmund. Today, and rightly so, we are positioning Edmund front and centre in this celebration of his life. Edmund's story began 79 years ago in a village in Poland on the 9th of February 1946. He was one of 7 children in the family, 4 boys and 3 girls. Edmund was the eldest boy in the family. He grew up enjoying all of the benefits of village life in Poland. After completing his schooling, he qualified as a surveyor, then studied engineering. Edmund and Grace decided, and it was a big decision, to move to Australia. And after landing in Sydney on the 10th of March 1981, they spent the first 6 months in a migrant hostel near Liverpool. Subsequently, they moved to Summerhill, then Randwick in 1987, and finally to Neutral Bay in 1994. Edmund pursued a very successful career as a structural engineer, working with major construction companies including Civil and Civic, Lend-Lease Corporation, Multiplex, and John Holland. He worked on building the Sydney Olympic Stadium, the Parramatta Stadium, Chifley Plaza, and numerous other major developments in Sydney, Manchester, Norwich, London, Rotterdam, Warsaw, Munich, and Abu Dhabi. And I now invite Ron Murphy to come forward and deliver the first eulogy.
Grace has asked me to talk about Ed's career, and for all of you that know Ed, what a privilege that has been. Thank you, Grace. If I was relying on what Ed had told me, there'd there'd be not much to talk about today, because Ed was a very private person. He was not a big noter nor a braggart, but he of all people had a career that was worthy of bragging about now and again, and that was rare. That is the sort of person Ed Obiala is. Grace, on behalf of all of Ed's collective fans, I extend our sincere condolences to you and his family. Please know that we're all here to support you. We all know Ed was a gentleman, humble, honest, softly spoken, authentic, and respected by all. He was also a tough guy, and having said that, he would politely, in his own way, not suffer fools gladly. Our industry has its fair share of fools, but today is not the day for names. Ed would be embarrassed with the number of people present today and gathering in tribute to him. There's many of his friends have sent messages through, and at a time I'll pass these on to Grace. Why would Ed be embarrassed? Because this is the sort of person he was. No fuss, not drawing attention to himself. He may well be in the back seats maintaining his lifelong low profile. Well, Ed, sorry mate, that's not the way it works. You are respected and loved by many. Growing up, Ed had a hero, excuse my pronunciation, Yanis Sidlow, who was a javelin thrower at the 1956 Olympic Games, Melbourne Olympic Games. This converted in Ed's mind to dream of competing also in javelin at the 64 Tokyo Games. I never knew that. Somebody told me. Well, Ed, you are a hero to many, including, since we have now learned that for every year since 2000, you have sponsored a group of underprivileged students from your hometown in their education, including university. That stands today, I've been told, at 50 people. That's the sort of person Ed Obiala is. Ed and Grace fell in love when they were 19, around 1965, and that romance continued to his last day and after 57 years of marriage. Hope I got that right, Grace. After attaining, so I just want to fill in a few blanks about the general thing about Ed. Ed obtained a master's degree in engineering. In 1979, he arrived in Australia as a refugee in 81, and in 82 was introduced to our colleague Jim Sloman for an interview by a civil and civic general foreman who happened to be Polish. Even though Ed couldn't speak English, Jim was told Ed was a very special person, and if he employed him, he would teach him English. I understand through that process, Ed was part sponsored by the federal government into civil and civic as a site engineer. That is when the journey began. And golly, how so many thousands of people have benefited by that. I met Ed in 1985 on the Parramatta Stadium where our 40-year friendship began. How would I know I was in the presence of such a special person on the one hand and could only be described as a genius on the other? For the benefit of all of us present and those watching on the streaming service, the definition of genius is, and I quote, the exceptional natural capacity for creative and original conceptions. Amen to that. Ed was that special. For all employers of Ed, please don't think how lucky you were to have Ed as an employee. Think about why he moved on. Our friendship began at the workplace and developed into a very close personal relationship where we would meet regularly over lunch, as you do, and critique the industry in general, the people, and we'd end up with an orange juice solving the problems of the industry and the world. Many of the industry leaders often say their employees are their biggest asset. Many of the employees don't believe they mean that. But the worth of Ed Obiala as part of a team, whether that be a singular project or a corporation, is simply immeasurable. Ed was not a huge person physically, but he was a giant of our industry. I'd just like to fill in a few gaps so that people understand, and I'm sure you all do in your own way, about how special this bloke was. Parramatta Stadium, this is just a snapshot of some of the projects, because I didn't want to take up a lot of time. Parramatta Stadium, 30,000 capacity. Sydney Football Stadium, 50,000 capacity. National Australia Bank, 36 commercial story building. Chifley Tower, which I later worked on, as it turned out, 53 stories. Sydney Central Plaza, 36 stories, 85,000 square metres retail capacity, with a hotel, by the way. Sydney Olympic Stadium, 115,000 seating capacity. Stamford Bridge in the UK, 40,000 capacity. Munich City Towers, 23 stories. You're taking all this in. This is the edge of a fabulous career. Chapel Field Shopping Centre in Norwich, in the UK, 60,000 square metres of retail. Stratford City Development, which was a mixed development in the UK, was only worth £3.4 billion. A sports stadium in Abu Dhabi, Everton Football Stadium, UK, 60,000 capacity. Canary Wharf in the UK, Ed was developing from site into leading bids to win work for whoever he's working for, and the whole show. There was nobody better. He was involved in the London Olympic venues, all venues, the Crossrail tunnelling packages at Tottenham Station, Bond Street Station, 28 kilometres of tunnelling, London. Ed was more than a structural engineer. Sorry for any structural engineers here, but he was the real deal and the full package. He did more than design. Reconstruction of the ANZ Stadium, Sydney Opera House, and more lately, Sydney Central Station, which, for those of us in Sydney know what's going on there, is huge. This list of projects is only a snapshot of what he's spent his days and weekends on. He also received a number of awards recognising his contribution to individual projects that I think is just quite extraordinary. 1982, he is the Polish Ministry of Building for the design of an agricultural complex, winner of the Bradfield Award for the Sydney Football Stadium, then the British Construction Industry International Award for the design and construction of Stadium Australia, the National Arborist Association, which is pretty out of field, isn't it? Grant Award for Excellence in Arboriculture, Master Builders Association Awards, Outstanding Construction Award, Excellence in Environmental Management, Excellence in Energy Sufficiency, and Excellence in Sporting Facilities. In 1999, an honour was bestowed on him as an honorary citizen from his home village. Also in 1999 was a huge year. Australian Institute of Engineers in the following categories: Australian Construction Achievement Award for an overall project, Sir William Hudson for the most outstanding entry to the National Engineering Excellence. Winner's certificate, the citation reads, for achieving outstanding engineering excellence and substantial impact on the national economy, the quality of life of Australians, and the reputation of Australian engineers in Australia and overseas. Again, winner of the Bradfield Award. In 2000, you're keeping up with all this? This is pretty glamorous stuff. He was appointed as the Olympic attaché for the Polish Olympic team. And again in 2000, he was elected a man of the turn of the century for a region in Poland. I'm not going to even attempt to try and pronounce it. And then in 2000 again awarded the Order of Merit for a city in Poland. I've received some notes from Ed's family in various formal relationships, and I'd just take a minute in closing to quote these out for you. Anna and Peter Tursky, and as it turned out, Anna worked with many of us here on number 1 O'Connell Street. She moved to New York later and has been living there for 22 years. So I quote Anna, to the rest of the world, Eddie was a genius engineer who built skyscrapers. To me, he was more than just my favourite uncle. He was my dear friend, and since 1996, I've considered him to be my dad. He was loving, caring, and a great listener, giving me thoughtful advice with his soft, calming voice. As we grieve in this loss of Eddie, we remember the love and joy he brought into our lives, and I'm so grateful when we met in Sydney last November. He is no longer with us, but his legacy will live on through us. The family, his values, and the stories we would tell about this amazing, kind, generous, and thoughtful man that impacted everyone he met. From Ed's sister and Anna's mother, my beloved brother Eddie and I spent our childhood together and were brought up in a very poor family of 7 children, working in the fields in difficult times and dealing with many challenges. We also worked for local farmers in our spare time, which there probably wasn't much of. Eddie had a passion for cycling, and as a teenager he had a racing cycle, and we'd often travel many kilometres as Eddie was very athletic and cared about his health and fitness. Despite us living in different countries, the distance never erased our bonds. I hope we will meet again. Ed's niece and Anna's sister. The words we say every day can have a huge meaning and impact on our life. They stick somewhere in our memory, and we often hear their echo. As a child, I heard that the birds that sing so beautifully in the sky were singing for me. I was 7 and Uncle Eddie was 26. He was neither a psychologist nor a teacher by profession, but he left me wings of faith in myself, for which I'm very grateful. This quote is Ed's in times gone by, talking about the industry that he loved, which is construction. It's the process of education of everyone who's involved in a project, who's associated with the project, and who's trying to learn about the project. Creating that kind of unity, which involves everyone, and sometimes families. I think this is the best recipe for success. With that, thank you for listening. And Grace, bye.
Thank you, Ron. We have a number of other items in the program today, so if I may be so rude as to ask the next two eulogists to try and keep the time down a little. I'm sorry to say that. I've never said it before in the last 18 years, but I think it's important because we do have some time constraints. I now invite Margaret Kwiatkowska to come forward and say some words for us.
Dear Edmund, dear friends, there is never a good time to say goodbye to those dear to us, but there is always a good time to cherish their memory. We have gathered here today to say farewell to our exceptional friend. His passing has left us in deep sorrow, but today we also wish to celebrate his life and everything he meant to us and to the world. Edmund, known to his friends as Edek, was an outstanding structural engineer and project director. He was a role model, an inspiration, and at the same time a very humble man. He had an extraordinary ability to carry out complex projects, and that ability will remain a lasting motivation for us to keep moving forward. Edmund was born in the village of Niszczewice in the Złotniki Kujawskie municipality in Poland. He earned his degree at the University of Science and Technology in Bydgoszcz and later received a master's degree in building, ways and bridges from the Poznań Polytechnic. Next was a PhD from the Wrocław Polytechnic. And for the rest of his life, he was always mastering his skills. In his youth, he practiced athletics and karate at the Zawisza Bydgoszcz Sports Club. He was also a co-organizer of the first Polish karate championships. He loved theater, cinema, country music and sports, but he could not swim. In 1981, together with his wife Grażyna, he immigrated to Australia, where he began a new chapter of life and of his career. But he never forgot his homeland. For a quarter of a century, he sponsored the education of 50 talented yet underprivileged students from schools in that region, helping them realize their educational dreams. Edmund had an impressive portfolio of completed projects, many of which are recognized around the world. After arriving in Australia, he worked, among others, on the construction of Parramatta Stadium and the Sydney Football Stadium, at the time the largest sports facility in Australia, as well as the Chifley Tower. In 1994, he won an international competition to build the Olympic Stadium for the Sydney 2000 Games, which he completed in 1999. Following this achievement, the Polish Olympic Committee appointed him as Olympic attaché to the Polish national team. As the Polish community organization Olimpol, we had the honor of working alongside Edmund to support the Polish athletes with their needs during the Games. He had a genuine connection with the Polish sports community. Sport was something he truly loved. The friendships he formed during the Olympics have lasted to this day. Just this past January, he was cheering on Polish tennis players at the United Cup alongside some of you gathered here today. In recognition of his heartfelt dedication and outstanding support for Polish sport, he was honored with the gold medal of the Polish Olympic Committee. After the Olympics, he went to Europe to undertake management work on the Munich City Tower, the construction of Everton Stadium in Liverpool, and Chelsea Stadium in London, and many others. 1 year before the Sydney Olympics, Edmund became the chief executive of the new Wembley Stadium project in London. He returned to this project in 2006 as an advisor to the Ministry of Sport and helped bring it to the completion in 2007. As the lead technical coordinator, he was responsible for the design and construction of many venues for the London 2012 Olympic Games. After London, he pursued new challenges in Abu Dhabi and finally returned to Sydney in 2011, where he oversaw the construction of an underground logistics system at the Sydney Opera House. Edmund was recognized with numerous prestigious awards, as you heard earlier. I just wanted to mention Grand Prix from the National Arborist Association for Arboriculture in 1999, and the British Construction Industry International Award for the design and construction of Stadium Australia. He was a devoted friend, known to us for his calm and stoic demeanor. Someone who could tell a joke with the straightest face. Always kind, patient, and deeply attentive to others. He was a man who truly listened. Of course, the most important person in his life was Grażyna, known as Grace. His wife, confidant, and best friend, with whom he spent 59 wonderful years. Today, we say goodbye to Edmund with heavy hearts, and we stand with Grażyna in her grief over the loss of her beloved husband and our dear friend. Pope John Paul II said, "A person does not die completely if they live on in our memory and hearts." The Latin phrase non omnis morial means, "Not all of me shall die," expressing the belief that some part of who I am, my words, my impact, my story, will outlive me. Dear Edek, we thank you for everything you were to us. Your kindness, wisdom, and friendship will always remain with us. We remember you with gratitude and respect. We bid you farewell knowing that your legacy will live on in the world and that you will always remain in our hearts. Rest in eternal peace, our dear friend.
Thank you, Margaret. I now invite Bill Buckland to say a few words.
Ed was a communicator. One of the sad things was at the end of his life it wasn't so easy. It was a tragic ending, but one of the things I can tell you is that his words at the end, he could talk to Grace. He could say Grace's name, and that was something, I hope she doesn't mind me saying it, to me that was a very powerful thing. His love was there, even though he couldn't communicate with the rest of us. It was something important. I did visit Ed, and that was a difficult situation. We all knew Ed as a marvellous leader of projects, and there are many people here today who worked on the stadium and other projects with him. I might say Dave Gadoom from Multiplex wrote me a note and said, the delivery of Stadium Australia was a major stepping stone for Multiplex in the delivery of complex infrastructure projects. It was our first project of this kind, and Ed's leadership, which was always delivered in a gentle and thoughtful way, was invaluable. He was instrumental in its successful delivery for the Sydney Olympic Games, and he was very proud that many of his project team here today have since gone on to lead successful careers in the construction industry. Ed was respected by clients, interestingly enough, as well. We had tough clients. We had Colin Ging was the government representative on Stadium Australia, and Ed finished up being a long-term friend with Colin over the years. On a more personal note, he worked with all of us as... sorry, I got out of line there. Many of us looked and saw Ed as the leader of that project. John Watmore and I were putting together the bid. Interestingly enough, at the end of that time, there were some moves in the company to have some of us moved away from those roles. Ed stood by us and said the people that did the work get to stay on and do the project, which we did with great loyalty to him. And that's true of people here today who saw that. For me personally, this was the start of many things. I did other projects. I went to London with him, and we put in the bid originally for Wembley. I then went and did Suncorp Stadium and other projects for other companies, big projects around the world and in Australia. Another person that had written to me recently and asked was Stephen Morley. Stephen Morley was the structural engineer that came up with many of the ideas on Stadium Australia. Ed said, and I think this is true, would reply to a lot of people here, Ed had a profound effect on my career as an engineer. Ed was prepared to back me as an engineer for his most important project. I had just completed a second stadium and started on my own practice. Ed was the best client one could have because he was a consultant on the job, with a deep understanding of engineering, patient and kind, but tough when needed. I still recall Ed banning the Multiplex board from the site to ensure a smooth delivery. The way Ed managed the delivery of Stadium Australia was exceptional and contributed greatly to the Sydney being the most successful Olympic Games ever. We subsequently worked together on Wembley Stadium and then the delivery of London. I might say I just heard this morning from Paul Henry, who is the principal architect for Populous. Populous, Paul is in Tokyo consulting on and preparing architectural works for Japan. And he remembered the wonderful things about Ed and always considered that he had a good sense of humour. He always had a bag of apples on his desk, which Paul reminded us it was the power food that Ed used. So whether it was, that was what happened. He said that Ed was a great supporter of the design and how the design would integrate. And that's one of the things that I learnt from Ed. in my career that followed. Ed was very much a person that saw a project as a whole aspect, be it environment, construction, design, architecture, whatever it was, it became as part of the project, and that was the power of what his ability to do. He could look at you, and I was talking to one of the young fellows here that had been on the project, and he said the same thing as I feel, that Ed looked into you, he saw some ability in you that you had therein, and he would help you preserve it. He would give you confidence to follow that role and to go into it deeply. And I felt that, and that followed me through the rest of my career. To finish, we all remember Ed as a wonderful contributor in what he brought in life, as a partner to Grace, as a friend, and to many as a truly skillful project leader and giant in the construction industry. Indeed, rest in peace, Ed, for a life well lived, and that's how I see it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Let us now view a selection of images from Edmund's life. Could I please ask everyone to be upstanding for some words of farewell? Edmund lived a good, full life spanning 79 years. Like everybody else, he brought nothing into this world and has taken nothing out of it. But during the period between his birth and his death, he did a lot of things that touched people's lives and brought happiness to others. Because he was such an accomplished, much-loved, unique man, it is hard to say goodbye. But hard though it may be, that is what we are now called upon to do. And here in this last rite, we commit his body to its kindred elements. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Edmund Obiala, we honour you. We farewell you. We appreciate all the good things you contributed during your lifetime. You will live on in our hearts and memories. Please be seated. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us today as together we have celebrated Edmund's life, honoured his memory, and said our goodbyes. In a few moments, when we conclude this tribute to Edmund, the family warmly invites you for light refreshments in the Wallamutta Function Centre and in the Jade Room in that centre. The easiest way of getting there is when you leave the chapel, straight through the gate, turn right and just follow the path round. It's only a very short stroll. Today, of course, has been very much a non-religious farewell, but importantly, if you could make a note, on Sunday the 25th of May at 11 o'clock in the Polish Catholic Church, and I'll have a go at pronouncing it, Częstochowa, sounds more Chinese, doesn't it? For Catholic Mass, so if you could keep a note of that. The Polish Catholic Church, Our Lady, Queen of Poland, in Quakers Road, Marion. As we leave this chapel today, let us remember Edmund, not just because of the things he did and the events of his life, but let us also remember him for the person he was. A much-loved, highly accomplished, unique person who has left us with the legacy of a life well worth celebrating. Let us now conclude this tribute to him with the words of a Celtic blessing. May the road rise to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face. May the rains fall softly upon your fields. Until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand.
And now the purple dusk of twilight time steals across the meadow of my heart. High up in the sky, the little stars climb, always reminding me that we're apart. You wandered down the lane and far away, leaving me a song that will not die. Love is now the stardust of yesterday, the music of the years gone by. Sometimes I wonder why I spend the lonely nights dreaming of a song. The melody haunts my reverie, and I am once again with you when our love was new, and each kiss an inspiration. But that was long ago, and now my consolation is in the stardust of a song beside a garden wall. When stars are bright, you are in my arms. The nightingale tells his fairy tale of paradise where roses grew. Though I dream in vain, in my heart it always will remain my stardust melody, the memory of love's And now the purple dusk of twilight time steals across the meadow of my heart. High up in the sky, the little stars climb, always reminding me that we're apart. You wandered down the lane and far away, leaving me a song that will not die. Love is now the stardust of yesterday, the music of the years gone by. Sometimes I wonder why I spend the lonely nights dreaming of a song. The melody haunts my reverie, and I am once again with you when our love was new, and each kiss an inspiration. But that was long ago, and now my consolation is in the stardust of a song